you. My name is Dr. Kate Edwards, and I'm your host. Today we're going to talk about the right state of mind. So we're going to talk about beliefs, mindset, attitude, how that affects you and your overall wellness. I have a guest today, Dr. Kensa Gunter.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. She's a licensed psychologist and certified consultant in sports psychology. She has a private practice right here in Atlanta,
Yes.
where she provides consulting and performance enhancement services, right?
Yep.
For athletes of all skill levels.
Yes.
She also does some consulting for other local businesses in the area. And Kensa and I work together a lot with clients and in business in general, and I've learned so much from her over the last few years, so I'm hoping that you'll learn from her as well.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
Thank you again for inviting me. This is exciting.
Yeah. So let's start off by just talking about beliefs and mindset and what that kind of means. So if somebody is having a hard time because they've had an injury or they have persistent pain or just in general in their life and they want things to get a little bit better, how can they do that by addressing their mindset or their beliefs?
Right. So I think the first thing that I would want to share is that, this notion of mind-body wellness is a very real thing, because a lot of people try to separate the two and they think that they can address the physical pieces without addressing the mental pieces. But kind of as you stated, and as the purpose of this is to suggest, is that mind and body are very reciprocal. So what we do and what we think about in our mind affects our bodies, and what we do physically and what's going on with us physically affects our mind. So really integrating the two and working on both at the same time is what's most effective for total or overall health and wellness. So the first thing I think is to try to become more aware of the thoughts and belief systems that we have. Our mind is constantly going, and some of the things can be so automatic that we may not even be consciously aware of what we're thinking to even know how it impacts us.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the first things that I would encourage people to do, is kind of take a pause and think about those automatic thoughts and those automatic belief systems that you hold, and whether or not they're helping or not helping you in a certain way. So whenever anything happens, we have a thought about it, right?
Right.
And so really, like I said, kind of becoming more aware would be the first step.
So what would be an example of that? So for instance, when I got sick, I didn't realize that I wasn't addressing so many different things, and that I was using my running and my endurance exercise to kind of push things down in a way. And it took me, this big, huge event, this catastrophic event, for me to actually look at myself and say, oh my gosh, I need to make some changes. What can we do, or what kind of things can we look for before that happens?
So I think one of the things, we're not always aware of kind of what we're thinking necessarily, but stress is usually a big indicator for us that something is going awry, right?
Right.
So if I think about, as I said a moment ago, kind of becoming aware of your thoughts, but also becoming aware of when you feel stressed, or when you start to feel overwhelmed or taxed, or when you start to engage in those avoidance kind of behaviors. Like you said, you used running and it pushed everything down, and that's good. But if you're using that kind of activity, if you're kind of procrastinating a lot more or doing different things to avoid and cope, then that may be an indicator that you might need to pause and think, why am I doing this, right? Like, why am I engaging in this behavior? What is it that I'm trying to avoid thinking about? What is it that I may be trying to avoid feeling? Notice the avoidance pattern, because sometimes the avoidance pattern can key you in that something's going on, and I might need to pause and figure out what that is so that I can address it, right? Because we can't really fix or change anything that we're not willing to face or confront.
That's the truth.
So, right? So I think we know when we're stressed, right? If we're happy and feeling really great, we kind of know that too, but we don't pay attention to that as much, right? The alarm doesn't tend to go off unless something's going wrong. So I think in general, just trying to become more aware of emotionally where you are, doing check-ins with yourself. We check in with ourselves all the time.
Right.
If we feel something, if something aches, or if we feel like we have a lot of positive and good energy that day, we can feel that. And I think from a mental standpoint, we also need to take a pause and kind of think about that too. Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling proud? Am I feeling excited? Am I feeling frustrated? What am I feeling? And maybe identifying where that's coming from. I think as I talk about awareness, having words to describe emotions also becomes really important, because I don't think we tend to the emotional and psychological side of ourselves as much as we do to our physical side. And so just developing language to describe how you feel, what's going on for you mentally, what's going on for you in terms of emotions is a really good starting point too, to help you with that awareness.
So how would someone go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Isn't there a wheel of emotions? I've seen a couple different things.
Yeah, there are some things. What I'm thinking of in my mind, I'm thinking of getting back to the mind body health piece, and so I'm trying to not go back there.
Sure.
So one of the first things you could do is you could Google an emotion chart.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's really simple and that's really easy. But there are many different charts of emotions that give you terminology to describe the things that you're feeling beyond just happy and sad, because there are a wider range of emotions than that. And I think some people, we're familiar with emotions. We just don't like to talk about them a whole lot, right? And so I think definitely if you don't have language for it, Googling an emotional chart would really help to give you some words to go along with that. But also just pausing and thinking. When something happens and you have that reaction, pausing in that moment to try to identify what it is that's going on. Not avoiding it, not suppressing it, not pushing it away, not masking it with something else, but really taking the time to face the emotion in the same way that we face other things. Those are the things. And if you don't have the words for it, talking through what thoughts are going along, are happening for you, or talking about physically what might be going on for you. Because like I said before, there's a mind-body connection. So when we experience things emotionally, sometimes we feel them somatically as well. Absolutely. So if I feel that feeling in my stomach, what is that? If I now all of a sudden have a headache after having this exchange with someone, what is that? If I feel like I want to be alone and don't want to interact with people, why is that, right? So sometimes we can look at the behaviors to help us understand emotionally what may be going on, and then describe it and label it coming from that point.
Absolutely. I think that's actually really helpful to know. It's because we all know that we get that gut feeling or that visceral response when something isn't going the way that we want it to go.
Right.
Or we all can feel like our heart racing if we're stressed out or anxious about something.
Yes.
And
there's a feeling that goes along with that physical sensation, but we don't often label it, or we kind of clump it in, like everything becomes anxiety. And it might not be. It might be hurt. It might be disappointment. It might be excitement, right? I think a lot of times we label things quickly, or don't give ourselves permission to experience the wide range of emotions that really exist. The other thing that I think we do is try to suppress negative emotions.
Oh, yes.
And that's not, so if I think about a person who is maybe having some health difficulties or dealing with injury, recovery is not a straight path up.
No,
it's not a linear process, right? It's definitely like that. But we often, and in society at large, I think we don't give ourselves permission to feel those negative emotions. And UC Berkeley just released a study earlier this week that suggests that people who allow themselves to feel negative emotions actually have better psychological health. Because when we feel bad about feeling bad, that makes us feel worse.
Absolutely.
Right? But if we give ourselves permission to feel what we feel in that moment, whether it's frustration because this rehab process is not going the way I want to, whether it's anger and sadness because this injury has happened at a very inopportune time. Maybe if I'm working with my athletes, maybe they were heading towards their postseason, or maybe they were preparing for a championship match, or maybe they were preparing for a big competition if it's an amateur runner or something like that. And so it really could happen at an inopportune time, and not allowing yourself to feel the reality of those emotions can actually hurt you more than it can help. So experiencing the range and giving yourself permission to do that.
Oh, I think that's really good. Really good to know, because a lot of my patients will say, I know I shouldn't be angry about this. I know I shouldn't be sad. But the truth
why
is,
not?
Yeah, why not?
Why
it's
not?
Happening.
Right.
Address it. Sit
you
with
are
it,
allowed
feel
to
it.
feel what you feel. Now, what we will say is, don't stay there. Right?
Yes.
So don't stay there. If you feel that emotion, that's fine. But we also want you to be able to kind of rally and tap into that resilience that we all have in order to bounce back and keep going. And that becomes really important. So that's where the mindset may come in even more, right? Is to make sure that you open your mind to the possibility that healing, recovery is possible, right? And it's not to say that the thought itself will create the healing, but physiologically we respond to holding on to the possibility and the belief that healing is attainable.
That's right. And that's what we were, prior to starting, we were actually just talking about that. I'm reading this book called Mindset.
Yes.
And it talks about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And that's kind of what you're addressing right now. Is that right?
Absolutely. So Carol Dweck is the author of that book, and she's a professor out at Stanford, I believe. And she was looking at achievement and success, and in that, looking at mindset as a construct and kind of how mindset plays into both achievement and success. And she came up with the terms of growth mindset and fixed mindset. And essentially, the goal is to try to strive for a growth mindset. With a fixed mindset, essentially an individual believes that there are certain traits that are just fixed and inherent. There's no way to change them. There's no way to improve them. They're just there. So things like talent, intelligence, they're fixed and they won't change. No matter how much work you do, no matter how much effort you put in, nothing will change. You can see how having that kind of mindset might make somebody really stay stuck in a place of where they are. On the flip side, the growth mindset suggests, yes, we have these traits, but we can enhance them and improve them through our work ethic. We can tap into resilience. We can learn more. We can expand where we are by some of the things that we choose to do. And so nothing is really fixed so much as it is a starting point. And that growth mindset really becomes important, again, as you're talking about those who are injured or dealing with injury, because it's a matter of helping them to regain functioning that they once had and being able to believe that they can do that and that their effort, their work, the time, the energy spent will get them back to where they want to be is a really important part of that healing process.
I think so. And when I was listening to the book, because I listened to them instead of read, I listened to them in Atlanta traffic. I was really thinking about how that applied to people with chronic disease, people with acute disease, and how they approach the situation.
Yes.
So when somebody, gets a diagnosis, and maybe it's something that they never thought that they would get. How can they go into that diagnosis thinking, okay, I'm going to make it I'm going to make it through this, and I'm going to be all right on the other side?
Right. I think one of the first things that a person has to do in a situation like that is come to a point of acceptance. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with positive or negative mindset or anything per se, but just accepting the reality of the situation, right? That doesn't mean that you have to like it. That doesn't mean that this reality will have to be your reality moving forward, but we have to accept where we are when we're there so that we can move from that place, right? So if somebody receives this diagnosis, it's accepting that this has happened, and now it is, what can I do, right? Because the thing about injury, the thing about health difficulties, they're unexpected oftentimes, and they make the person feel like they have zero control.
Absolutely.
And whenever we feel like we have no control as people, we are more prone to a negative mindset because we feel like our life is not in our hands, right? And so acceptance allows you to then look at the situation, kind of appraise it, see all the sides of it, and then identify where you do have control and identify where you are able to take some action to maybe manage the condition if it's not a condition that can be cured, or move toward a cure if it is one where a cure is available, or for injured people who are dealing with injury, kind of what can you do to help facilitate your recovery process so that you can regain your functioning, right? So that acceptance becomes really big. And from that, you can start to identify and regain your control. And you might not be able to control everything, but oftentimes there are some things that you can control. And focusing on that can help a person to feel more motivated and to feel more competent, which then helps them feel confident, right? So if I feel like there's something I can do and I do it successfully, that gives me a belief that I can repeat that action and continue to do things in the future.
So for other healthcare providers, this is something, so Kensa also comes and speaks to a class I teach at Emory, and the students love you.
That was fun.
I know, it is fun. And they still
class.
talk about it. It's
good.
Yeah, it's good. But you taught them a lot of things that they hadn't heard before in terms of, as healthcare providers, how can we empower people? How can we give them a little bit of control in a situation where they feel like there's no control?
Absolutely. I think giving them information is a really big thing. It seems small, but including them in your treatment planning and also explaining to them why you're doing what you're doing helps. Yeah. Because that removes some of that unexpected feeling, and it allows them to feel like they're collaborating with you in the process rather than just following instructions. And so really that can go a very long way and do a lot towards helping somebody to buy in to the rehab program that's been prescribed for them. I think that's true of anyone, right? Like, but just think about people. We like information. We want to know what's going to happen, when is it going to happen, how's it going to happen. Like, most of us want to know. And so think about a person who has lost their functioning in some way. They want some information. And so again, thinking about your patients or thinking about partnering with your patients in the process is a really important thing, I think, for healthcare professionals to do. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we try to do all the time, and I find that we just get much better results, and people really love to be a part of what they're trying to achieve.
Right. And I think being open to feedback. Yeah. So asking them for feedback and incorporating that feedback into what you do is also helpful, because as people, we're the experts on our experience, right? And so I think remembering that when we're working with people, as I work with them in my practice, as we're talking through counseling things, or as you all are working with them, working with, physical therapy and kind of their rehab, they're the experts on their experience. And so seeking their input, taking that feedback, incorporating it into the plan, collaborating with them in the process, helps them to feel control, helps them to feel like they know what's happening, helps them to feel like they're valued and their voice is valued. I think the other really big thing to do is to, when a person is struggling with any kind of injury, illness, health-related thing, is to help them focus and define themselves based on what they can do versus what they can't do.
Right, because identity is a huge
Identity becomes a huge piece of it. And it's very easy to get caught up in what feels like it's been lost, as opposed to still holding on to and strengthening what capabilities they have. And so that becomes something that we as healthcare providers can kind of encourage and remind them to do. But from a psychological standpoint and thinking about that right state of mind, focusing on and defining yourself according to your strengths that you still have, the capabilities and abilities you still have, and not so much by what you no longer have, becomes a really good stepping stone to help people move forward in any kind of recovery process.
I completely agree with you, and I still struggle with that sometimes because I don't know how to identify myself periodically. For instance, today I had an appointment with my cardiologist, and I had to do an exercise test just to see, where we were and where I could continue forward in a safe way. Yes. And when he told me, he said, "Well, Kate, you're like 99% of the typical American population." Right. I said, "Yeah, but I'm nothing compared to what I used to be," which is terrible.
It's not the best. It's not the best statement to say to yourself at all.
And I know that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
think about how that statement, how you carry that. Right? Think about how you carry that, not just in that moment, but if you carry that in different experiences that you have throughout the course of your day, throughout the course of your week, and think about the emotion that then will be attached to that, right? There's hurt, there's sadness, there's loss, and then there's this feeling of inadequacy. Absolutely. That you're incapable, right? And so then that becomes the foundation for your mindset, when that's not, in fact, true. But perception is reality, right? We've all heard that statement. Perception is reality, because perception shapes our understanding of things, and it shapes how we are perceiving situations, which also then shapes how we experience different things, and then what we believe about those things, right? And so we have to be careful about how we talk to ourselves, because we're listening.
I know, and I know better.
But you're also human, right?
That's
so
right.
I would also say, don't beat yourself up for having that thought.
Right.
Just recognize it, and then subtly make the adjustment.
No, I think that I was before, when I was preparing for our show today, I thought, wow, that was a really great example of what what we shouldn't do. Even
it's so automatic. And like and even if you can, I said earlier, if you can't identify the emotion, a lot of times we can identify our belief systems and our attitudes based on what we say. Right? Like, oh, I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have done that. How could I do that? I'm nothing compared to what I used to be. I can't, right? I can't do whatever, insert whatever. And so thinking about language also becomes important. The words that we use have power. And so we have to be aware of how we are talking about ourselves and to ourselves. And what I often recommend to my clients when I'm working with them is, well, what would you say to your best friend? Right?
I love that. Yeah.
Because we often show a lot more compassion to others than we will show to ourselves. So if it takes you thinking about yourself as your best friend, treat yourself like you're your best friend, right? So what would you say to a friend in a situation? I'll ask parents, what would you say to your child in this situation? You would never speak as critically to them as we do to ourselves. And I think the idea of showing ourselves more compassion and just kindness can help us in adopting a more open and positive mindset when it comes to the many challenges we may face in life.
And I think that's a great segue into, looking at ourselves, even if we have, even if we're not injured, even if we don't have chronic disease, even if we are healthy in every way that we believe we should be healthy in. We still have to think about how we're framing things. We still have to think about our attitudes and our beliefs.
Yes, definitely, because they shape everything. Right? Because our attitudes and our beliefs, I said a moment ago, they impact how we perceive things, how we experience things, how we interact with others. They also impact our expectations, right? So we can kind of open our world or constrict it based on how we're thinking. And so really taking some time to cultivate a mindset that is consistent with who we are and what we want to be, it becomes really important. And it, I don't necessarily have a prescription for exactly how you do that. I think it's different for everybody. But I do think kind of thinking about how am I attending to my mental health and well-being, and what am I doing to develop a mindset that helps to propel me forward in life. Thinking, just pause and think about that. Whether that's reading self-help books, right, that are inspiring to you. One of my favorite books is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I try to read it once a year, or at least sections of it once a year, to just remind me of things, particularly the don't make assumptions and don't take things personally are the two I struggle with the most.
Those are difficult.
Those are hard. But again, reading that helps to shift my mindset and kind of recalibrates me when I might be a little too much on the negative side, because I'm subject to do that too. So it could be reading. It could be listening to podcasts that are encouraging or motivational. Practicing gratitude. I think gratitude has become one of those kind of trendy terms of the moment, but I do not think that diminishes the power that it has to change our moods and to impact us in a positive way.
I agree. I actually am doing a whole segment on gratitude because of that.
That's awesome. Yes.
I have at my house, we have this jar. It's this big, huge jar. And every night when we get home, my son, my husband, and I have to write what we're grateful for, and we put it in the jar.
And you put it in the jar, and you collect them.
And we collect them. Isn't it great?
Because we collect our criticisms, and we replay them like a never-ending tape in our head. So we have to be intentional about balancing that out with what am I grateful for today? Great one. How did I step outside of my comfort zone today? Right? Like, how was I courageous? How did I take a risk? Whether it went well or you don't think it did is not the point. You did it, right? You did something and you pushed yourself beyond a limit that you had previously placed on yourself, right? So any of that kind of stuff. Where was my courage? What am I grateful for today? What made me happy? It could be simple, right? Well, wait, what made me smile today? Right? And if you haven't found anything, YouTube has a lot of videos that'll lead to a lot of laughter. And laughter, too, is one of those things that can help shift our moods. And so I think it is kind of developing this mental health wellness routine.
Right.
That really becomes important. Mindfulness and meditation, another one of those kind of trendy terms. But again, the benefits cannot be understated. No. Learning to pause and be in the moment, exceptionally hard, but extremely powerful and beneficial toward having us be engaged and present. And I'm not even going to say positive, but just being in the moment. And sometimes we don't have to be anything, but just be.
I found that even 2 minutes, 3 minutes of meditation or just sitting quietly outside in between patients or when I'm having a particularly overwhelming day can impact me in so many positive ways.
And it does not take long at all.
3 minutes.
It's just a break from the constant doing, the constant need for productivity, the constant grind that we put ourselves in, the mental grind, the physical grind. Just pausing becomes important. And also staying in the moment. So we tend to live in the past or the future, right? And what I often say is depression lives in the past because we're thinking about what we could have, should have, would have done, but we can't change any of it. And we have no control over changing the past. Anxiety lives in the future. I have a lot of my clients who live in the land of what if.
Right.
And their what ifs often end in some kind of negative outcome. When I ask them, how often do your what ifs end in a positive outcome? Right? They look at me very strangely or they laugh because it's not something they do, but why not? Why not? Because the what if with a positive outcome is just as probable as the what if with a negative outcome. So why not structure your thought to embrace the positive possibilities as much as we cling to the feared negative outcomes, right? So if depression lives in the past, anxiety lives in the future, what I like to say, the only moment that we have control in is now. And that's where your power is. And so mindfulness in helping people to be able to embrace the moment and be in it becomes a really good tool for them embracing their power, embracing their control, and kind of operating from a feeling of strength.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that becomes really cool. And taking a pause sometimes is important. I think we as a society have come to believe that rest is a bad thing.
Which is quite the opposite. No,
right?
It's true.
I mean, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, I don't know if that's really what we should be thinking. So this idea of rest, recharging, rejuvenating, kind of that becomes also very important because we need to revitalize and rejuvenate our minds too so that we can adopt the mindset that we want. I mean, an exhausted, tired, burned out mindset is more likely to go to a negative place.
Of course it is.
So giving ourselves an opportunity to pause and stop becomes important. What I say to my clients there is, if we're traveling from here to California, we get in a car, we go for the ride, and we never stop. Are we going to make it to California? And they're like, well, no, we're going to run out of gas. So what makes you think that you as a person can go forth in life moving without ever stopping? Because you too will run out of gas.
I love that. I'm going to use that with my patients. I love that.
But on the flip side, if we stop for 5 minutes to fill up or to check the oil or to make sure that the tire pressure is good, just brief check-ins, we will get to our destination. Yeah. As opposed to if we try to go without ever stopping. The same is true when we think about our mind and our bodies as we move through life.
Wow. I think that's pretty powerful. And I know it would help me, and I think it'll really help our audience gain power over what they can do. Just recognizing that they could take the 3 minutes that it would have taken to do the dishes to sit quietly.
Right.
Or they can stop and think about, wow, I'm really grateful for the fact that the lights are on. Or I'm really grateful that I can hear my son's laughter.
Right.
Or I had a lot of courage today, and I decided to do a show.
And I am going to give myself an A+ for that, right? Yeah, because that's where life is, outside of these zones and these boxes and these confined places that we put ourselves in. Just kind of go for it, right? And that too speaks to that mindset piece. failure is a part of the process too.
You can only learn from it.
Right. It's all a part of the process. Everything is a part of the process. There is no perfect anything.
That's hard to handle.
No, it is hard to handle. It is. And what I tell people is there is no perfect anything, but you can be excellent in a lot of things.
That's right.
Right? So again, it's that slight shift in mindset of focusing on what you can control, right? And mastering that, if you will. Master what you can control. Taking time to engage in some kind of mental health and wellness routine. Really making time to develop that part of yourself, because from the mind flows everything else, right? And so taking time to dedicate yourself to some kind of mental health regimen, as long or short as you want. Meditation, gratitude journal, spending time with friends. I haven't talked about that, but social support is also a really big part of developing the right state of mind and a positive mindset. Surrounding yourself with positive people, enjoying the connection that we as all humans need, really can help a person in kind of shifting from a negative mindset to a positive one, and can just boost their overall positive feelings.
Nope, that's true. I didn't even think to bring up friends or family.
Yeah,
and
that's important.
It is a huge part of our life. Who we surround ourselves with really affects what we believe in, how we feel, and what we do going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And anyone, if people are have a certain religious faith or spirituality that they adhere to, certainly that too can be used as a form of support, personal support for shifting your mindset and kind of staying in the positive realm, at least as much as we go to the negative realm, right? Like, it's balance. I'm not sitting here suggesting that we're never going to have negative emotions. As I said earlier, those are just as important as the positive ones. The range is really important. I think it's really, though, a matter of making sure that the automatic negative that we do, being intentional about focusing on the positive as well.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Kensa. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
I thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Hopefully it was helpful to your audience.
It was really helpful to me.
Oh, that works.
And I really hope it was helpful to you guys as well. So thank you for joining me on The Whole You. As usual, I want to hear from you. I want to know what you think. What can I do better? What kind of topics do you guys want to hear about? Just write in and let us know. Thanks a lot.